All right, morning, guys. So, what's going on, everybody? I wanted to take the time to put this is a sermon I do on grief. It is very near to me. I just did it last week on my sister, so I'll do that version of it. I've actually gotten to do a friend of mine's grandmother's funeral as well, so the Lord has just blessed me with what I think is a very effective sermon on how to process grief, whether that's the grief of losing a loved one, someone who's died, and um, but also it'll be for grieving any kind of loss that you go through, whether it's a job, it could be a bunch of things. You can lose a job, sometimes quit playing a sport. I know I grieved the loss of not being able to play rugby anymore. Not being able to play rugby anymore. That was tough. Retiring from fighting MMA, if you could consider it retiring or just quitting, whatever. I guess when you only fight 3 times, I don't know if that's really anything you can retire from. Professionally, I did fight a few times amateur. Anyway, so today I wanted to just kind of go through that sermon, have it on video, and make it accessible to you, whoever's watching, and maybe you can pass it to family members who are going through grieving. And don't ever, I just don't want anybody to mistake this for me thinking that I'm some kind of professional at grief, or that don't take it that I'm making light of, or telling you should be in a certain spot with your grief. But I truly believe that this is a blueprint of how to properly deal with grief, and how to not only be able to endure it and keep going, but actually to be able to thrive. And that's what we want to do in this life, right? We want to. That's the whole thing. If we're going to bring Jesus, the truth of Jesus, the King of everything, to a world that has people who so desperately need His hope. Then we have to bring them a message of thriving. We have to make this life better. Doesn't make it easier, doesn't make it more fun, actually makes it harder a lot of times. You become more aware of pain and brokenness, but it does make this life better, so much better. So, all right, here's a sermon on grief. The hurt, the help, and the hope. So we're going to start off in the hurt. Okay. So that's a kind of a 3-part thing, and you'll see as the sermon goes that the hurt is tied to the help, and the help is tied to the hope, and the hope is tied to the hurt, and you just keep running through that circle, and that's kind of life, right? Life of I heard a pastor say, you're either going through a tragedy, just about to enter a tragedy, or you're just coming out of a tragedy, but usually it's a combination of all three. So life's it's just full of heartache. The world's broken. I don't care if you are an atheist or madly in love with Jesus Christ of Nazareth. You can look outside and say that this world is messed up. All you have to do is just Google or put shooting in the and it's in your search engine, and it's going to pull up multiple people have been shot and murdered every day, all over the world, all the time. People are just very horrible to one another. There's death is always all around us, even where we live in a time where we like to pretend like we're not going to die. I don't know, because we live longer, and we send our dead to the funeral home, and when they get at the end, they go to hospice, and so we're not around death as much as the other humans throughout history have been. So we don't think about it as much. If it was back in the 1600s and Grandpa died, then grandson, dad, They dealt with the body. They dug the hole. They put Grandpa in the hole. They did the funeral. They didn't send him off. He would have died in one of the rooms of the hut or whatever, wherever they lived. And they would have watched him die, and they would have dealt with the body, and this would have been a process. The town would have probably had to help too, get neighbors, and so you would have been around death a lot more. But there's moments like funerals when you lose somebody who's really close to you, that you're reminded that we are marching towards an expiration date. So, death is the great enemy to God's creation. So this brings you to Genesis 1, page 1 of the Bible. Before God does anything else, before he gives, he says everything I've created is good, he pauses and then he says this. He says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image." That's one time. "After our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over every creepy thing that creeps on earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So that's 3 times that God said that we're made in his image, and we're made in the image of the Trinitarian God who speaks things into existence. So we serve a creator God. And nowhere in this picture did God say anything about death. Death came later, and death was is the great enemy to God's good creation. We weren't created to die. So humans 3 times before God even gets to talking about anything other than creating, he just says, like, the humans are so valuable, made in my image. He says it 3 times. So when a human dies, that's a great, great tragedy, and we need to stop. I like to use the metaphor of when you see like a younger lion comes up on a pride, and there's an older lion who's still strong, but the younger lion feels like maybe he can take him. So he comes in and he's going to go, and then they fight, and the younger lion wins. And then he goes and he's going to kill the older lion's babies because he doesn't want any of that. He's going to make his own babies and start his own dynasty, I guess. And you don't see all the lionesses going and calling the lion police, and and them gathering around and digging a hole and burying the body, and everybody's super just devastated. But lions are just lions. They're killers. They just kill, and it's just nature. And they might show some signs of sadness and mourning and connection, but for the most part, they just kind of exist. And we can argue about how sentient animals are, but they're nothing like humans. Humans, every time somebody dies, we're so devastated. It's something inside of us is just confused, because we're like, we just saw him yesterday, but every person is marching towards death. But every time there's something, even in humans who don't believe that we're image bearers, we still know that there's something just valuable about humans. And when someone we love dies, that is a great tragedy, and that's hard. And so it's good to march towards that pain. Don't pretend like it's not real. Just say, oh, he's in a better place, or think that because we're Christians we don't mourn. We do mourn. We grieve hard, because we understand how valuable human life is. That's why we're so pro-life and anti-abortion, because we understand the value of a human being from the moment he or she is conceived. So valuable. So yeah, if you're thinking of a loved one right now, if the hurt is just coming back up because I'm talking about this, whatever it is, whoever it is who's in your mind, and you think about them, that's a tragedy that person died. So ride that death roller coaster. Sometimes you're going to feel really, really down, and that's okay. Don't ever get mad at yourself for how you feel. It's how you react to those feelings that matters. And a lot of times the way you react is going to decide how long you stay in a certain state of mind. So if we have a joy. Like, we're allowed to be sad, and sometimes you need to cry, and sometimes you're going to need to just go sit down and just be in the hurt for a little bit, but we can't stay there. We go to the hurt for a little bit, and we're going to let God meet us in it. And the atheist will say, well, where was God when my mom died, or where's God whenever this Christian Catholic church over in Africa, where 60 people were shot and murdered, most likely just for worshiping. Martyrs truly paid the cost to worship Jesus. People say, where was God? Well, he was right there with them. He gives us grace in moments when we need it, grace that we didn't even know we need. So he carries us through the hurt. So let him just take care of you. Walk towards that hurt. Sometimes you're going to be on the grief roller coaster, and sometimes you're going to be down here. So let God meet you there. Allow him. He's always available, but there's something about in those moments of grief and just the raw brokenness and pain of life that that you're able to find him there. It's not that he's not available. He's 100% available, but it's our brokenness, our sin, our selfishness that makes us unaware of him. So tragedy opens up. It makes us tender. So that's the hurt. Like I said, you can ride that death roller coaster. Sometimes you're going to be low, but sometimes you're going to be up high. You're going to have a good memory of that person, or maybe you're going to be around someone else who, a family member, a best friend, and you're just going to be feeling okay. Don't feel bad about that either. That's good. That's God's grace, right? You're not sad in that moment. You're not hurting. The hurt's probably going to come again soon, but right now you're okay, and that's good. Your loved one, whoever it is who's passed away, my sister, my brother, my mom, my papa, granny, mama, papa, all the ones I've lost. None of them would want me to just sit around being sad because they're gone. So when you're at the top, it's okay. Like, give yourself permission to feel good and be happy. I can promise you, if that person was sitting in the room with you in that moment, they wouldn't want to, sit and be sad together. They want to be laughing, having fun, enjoying life. So we can thrive. We go down into the hurt, but then we come out and we thrive. So the next part would be the help. Matthew 5:4 says, "Blessed are those who mourn." So what does that mean? Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn. It's not saying that, like, if you're it's kind of about a perspective. So this was part of the Beatitudes, and Jesus is saying, if you're a Christian, these are the ways you're blessed. And one of those ways that you bless is that you mourn. Okay? If you're a Christian, you mourn, because we are I would even say hyper aware at that moment that we take the substitutionary death. That's what happened. Jesus went and took what we deserved. He stepped in. He was the perfect lamb so that there would have to be no more sacrifices. So when we exchange our brokenness for his blood, and we're redeemed through his substitutionary death, him taking what we deserve, he gives us what he deserved, which is everything. He wants to share everything with us. So at that moment, we also become hyper aware of just the brokenness around us. The closer you get to Jesus, the closer you're going to get to the brokenness in this world, because you're going to just be more aware of it. It's so much harder to just walk past human beings, image bearers, and just think, oh, that's just somebody who cut me off, or that's just a person who's being a jerk. No, you start thinking, man, that's an image bearer who's being a jerk for some certain reason, because of some certain thing that traumatized him or her, and he doesn't understand truth, and he doesn't know about how good Jesus is, and he's just mad and hurting. So let me give him grace. That doesn't mean I'm not a pacifist. That doesn't mean we act weak, but that's what turning the other cheek is. It's saying, okay, I'm going to give you room to scream and holler, but I'm going to treat you like a valuable human being. and that's the help, right? So Jesus is close to, blessed are those who mourn. Jesus is saying, if you are a Christian, you are going to mourn, and that is a blessing because he is in the mourning. He is near to us when we mourn. So that's part of it. Move towards Jesus. That's one of the first parts of help. Like I said, the atheist asks, where's God? He's right in the suffering. How many of y'all have think back of times in your life when you've lost something and how good Jesus seems to be and how much you can pay attention to him, how much more you're alert and aware of his presence. That's what happens when we go through tragedy, when bad things happen to us. We realize that we're not the center of the universe and that we actually have very little control in this life. One of the only things we have control of is how we react to situations. And we're not going to be able to react well if we're not proactive. If we're reactive, then we're not gonna do well. But if we're proactive, then we're able to be prepared, and then we react well. But if we're just reactive, if we just take things as they come, you're not going to be ready. So little things will break you. So what do you think the big things are going to do? You burn the food and you lose your mind. And it's like, wait, what? Why did that happen? Well, that's a deeper issue. You're not connected. You haven't learned how to mourn well. And so Jesus is in the mourning. When you're mourning, know that that's a part of this Christian walk. So we'll talk about the Lord's Prayer. The Lord's Prayer begins with, Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who have sinned against us. So there's this communal aspect, our Father who is in heaven, right? Us, together here, down below you. You are exalted and hallowed, the Holy One of the universe. But there is the our Father, not mine. Forgive us our trespasses. So our sins, they are tied together. We need to be forgiven not only personally, but we need to be forgiven communally. So not only is he our God in the moment alone when we're in our closet, but he's our God as we're walking out in the streets, or as we come together to worship corporately, or now even something like this, as you guys are watching me through the Holy Spirit. We're all connected in the way that we come together to worship God. So he's our Father. So that's part of the help. You must come to the Father, but you also must come to the Father with your fellow believers. The lone Christian thing, it doesn't work. We need one another. You want to be able to endure life, open yourself up to one of those miracles who are walking around. There's like 7 billion of them. So slow down and pay attention to those miracles. You could be the one who changes somebody's life. You never know. You could catch somebody who was walking to do something horrible, and because you say, "Hey man, what's going on? It's good to see you. I hope things are better. I just want you to know Jesus loves you." Slow down and talk to people. If you run into a friend at the store who you haven't seen in a while and you're trying to knock out some grocery list, slow down. So what if you get home 10 minutes later? Just slow down. Make time for people. That's how you endure this life. That is the help. Make time for people. They are so unbelievably amazing. I like to always talk about this because it blows my mind. From this moment right now to when I finish this sentence, 13 trillion cells have been born and died in your body multiple times. It's insane. The way that I always talk about how our hearts have to beat at just the perfect rhythm. If it's off by just a tiny bit, you drop dead. There's so many miracles. All the synapses and connections and all the stuff firing in your brain. The human brain is so unbelievably complicated. We know very little about it. And it's just so amazingly powerful. So many crazy things happening in our brains all at one time. The involuntary stuff, the voluntary stuff. The things we have control of, like moving our fingers, but then the fact that my heart just beats. It just beats. And the blood just flows through my body. Walking miracles. Slow down and pay attention to people and your life will be changed. The great irony of giving of yourself is that you actually receive a lot. God has made it to where when we help one another, we help one another. That when I go help somebody, it actually helps me. When I slow down and speak to someone, it actually blesses me. It's scientifically proven that our brain forms new synapses whenever we connect with people, whenever we honor a person who is sharing a tale of suffering, whenever we don't one up, when we don't say, oh yeah, well my grandma died last year and this is what we did. Now to say, hey look, to meet someone and say, oh yeah, I can relate to that. My grandma died and I remember how it felt for me. Was that how it was for you? And you ask and you stay on that subject. You don't take and one up and change the subject and make it about you. Slow down. When someone walks up to you to talk to you about something, talk about that subject with that person. Don't change the subject or make it about you. There's a difference between relating to a story and then stealing a story. So meet people in their suffering. Have time for people. And then Psalm 23, it says, the Lord makes me lay down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters, and He makes me to lay down in green pastures. And this is kind of the last step of the help. So you have to be connected to Jesus, know that He's in the morning, and then you have to remember that we are serving a huge, gigantic God who is above us, who is hallowed and holy, the Trinitarian God of everything, but He is our God, our Father, and we must serve Him together. We must be forgiven together. We must forgive together. So, the last part would kind of be, and I'm sure there's all other kind of other things you could take and think of ways you can apply to the help. But the Psalm 23, it says, He makes me lie down in green pastures. Now, I don't know how any of you are, but when, being an American who lives in North America and in South Louisiana, when I think of green pastures, I think of green pastures. I think of pastures. I think of cows. I think of grass everywhere, and them just walking around eating it in green pastures. And I think of maybe like He makes me lie down in green pastures. Comes to mind like maybe I lay out a sheet and I lay down on it in the sun, and I don't know, look up at the clouds and try to figure out if that's an elephant, and then argue with. I don't know that I'm going too far with that. So anyway. But that's not what this is talking about. This would have been written by David, who would have been a shepherd in Israel, and there's no such thing as like knee-deep alfalfa grass like you'd see out in the plains of Nebraska or something. That's not over there. They have hills. And on these hills, there's rocks, but mostly it's just hills and rocks. And if you're standing back far, a few hundred yards, you can't even hardly tell that there's any greenery. So when you say green pastures, this is where the shepherds lead the sheep. They said that no shepherd, no farmer would have allowed sheep on his green in spots where grass would grow. So the shepherds would lead him out to these hillsides, and on these hills there's these rocks, and there would be a little bit of rain each year, but and also some water would come over in the evenings, in the humidity being brought in from the Mediterranean Sea, and there would be just enough water to collect to cause these little sprouts of green to grow up, and the shepherds would lead them. And you can see all these cuts into the side of the hills, and they say shepherds have been doing this for thousands of years, all the way back to the times of Abraham, and it's just a tradition that's been carried on. So when these people heard green pastures where sheep are, they would have understood immediately that these sheep would have to be led. And when you look at these rocks, like I said, the water would come in from the Mediterranean, just a little bit of rain, and these sprouts of green grass will grow up, and the sheep would eat those. And you can kind of, there always are some everywhere. If you look around as you move in closer, they grow around the rocks. But the sheep will move in. The shepherd leads them there, and they eat and get a biteful, and then 10 minutes later, it's time to maybe move them again. I don't know exactly what the time frame would be, how long they stay at each spot, and the shepherd moves them along, and just gets them biteful. So it's not a day at a time. That's too big. One day at a time. No, we don't take it one moment at a time, one biteful. He's going to give you just enough. So that's the help. The help's not going to be all at once, take away the pain. No, you're going to have to deal with the pain right now, and then right now, and right now, from the Good Shepherd. So he's going to give you what you need now. 10 minutes from now, he's going to give you what you need. And then the hope. This is the best part. We're going to be in 1 Thessalonians 4:13, 5 through 11. I should have marked this. Sorry, y'all. Okay. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 5:11. This is the hope. Okay? The coming of the Lord. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. Okay, we're going to pause there. So what Paul is addressing here is after Jesus, left away at the beginning of Acts, and when he went off, and it says he'll come back the same way. Paul and most people were expecting Jesus to come back soon, just like we are today. We're just, all of us are kind of, expecting, when's that trumpet going to sound? And Paul, along with many other Christians, believed Jesus was going to come back in their lifetime. They just thought he was going to leave and he was coming back. So the Thessalonians, the people of Thessalonica, were just kind of getting stressed out, wondering, what happens to those of us who've gone before, and they were worried about them. So Paul was calling to just address that. And it says, that you may not grieve as others who do not have hope. So we grieve differently. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by a word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of a trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore encourage one another with these words. So a lot of people, that's crazy to think about what I just read. That's the hope. Okay, that's why we mourn differently. Jesus is saying, no, don't worry about those who've gone before us, who've fallen asleep, because they're going to rise first. God's going to take care of them first. And like in Aladdin, when you remember, as he was going into to go in and try to, I think, marry Jasmine, and he comes in and they send out a delegation out to welcome him in, and Prince Ali, fabulous he, Ali Ababa. I remember they're all dancing and everybody's having fun. The cartoon was, Robin Williams is doing all the different characters, and it's just a joyous and magnificent thing. And this is the same way it would have been when Caesar would come in to visit his cities, the states and the cities in his different states that he would reign over, and they would come and they would send them out and welcome him in and be like, the king is here, and they would celebrate and send in the delegation. So Paul is using this metaphor, and not only, I think it's actually literal too in a lot of ways, the way that Jesus is going to call us up to him, the dead first, and then all of us are going to gather and we're going to escort the king in as the reunification of heaven and earth. God's great plan of new creation will finally begin to be completed. The old will burn away and the new will be born, and the physical, awesome, amazing new earth will come to be. And so we're going to escort the king in, and not only as little kings, it's not like we're just escorting him in for him to continue to, like him to reign over us. He's going to reign with us, and that's the promise. That's the hope. That's why we mourn differently. That's why whenever tragedy comes, we pull up, we pull up our bootstraps. We say, okay. All right, God, this hurts. This is breaking me. I can barely stand, but I'm going to stand up. I'm going to walk towards this. And I'm gonna know, because of I'm gonna honor this pain. This is bad. I know this isn't good. I know good from wrong, and this is bad. So I'm gonna honor that pain. I'm gonna acknowledge it, it's going to break my heart. I'm going to mourn because whenever I see your will not being done, that breaks my heart, God. But then I'm going to move towards you because I know that as a Christian, I'm going to mourn and it's going to be blessing because I'm not okay with brokenness. So death makes me uncomfortable and I'm going to move towards that. I'm going to move towards community. I'm going to move towards those valuable human beings who are everywhere, all around me, who have similar stories, and we can come together and just share life together. And I'm going to meet people in their suffering. I'm going to be willing to be vulnerable too. Like sometimes I'm going to need to listen to somebody and take on their grief, but sometimes I need to open up and share. So I have to be the one who's willing sometimes to say, hey, look, I need to talk. I need to tell you I'm hurting. Communal. It's very communal. Mourning is a communal process. Don't isolate. Don't focus on yourself alone, because the great irony of that is you'll destroy yourself. When you try to be selfish and self-medicate, you end up destroying yourself. And then remember Psalm 23. Just one bite of grass here, one bite of grass there, and look up to the shepherd; he'll lead you. And you notice, like a flock of sheep, they don't always have to. They can't always see the shepherd, so they follow one another. So remember, somebody's looking at you. Somebody's following you. They need to know where the shepherd is. So pay attention. Just like if one sheep goes off by itself and another follows, that they're extremely vulnerable. When it's two sheep and you're off by yourselves, you're very vulnerable to wolves and attacks. So stay in community, stay in good community. One bite at a time. The shepherd will take care of you, and then you're gonna need to go back to the shepherd for another, and he'll show you where the next bite is, a little bit at a time. He's not just going to plop you down in grass everywhere and just give you whatever you need and make life happy. That's just not this life. That's the one that's coming. That's the hope when he comes back. No more tears. The old's got to pass away first, though. So we got to finish the process of beginning new creation till he comes and implements full new creation. We're his hands and feet. We're working ahead of him. So that's kind of verse 5 through 11 says. Now concerning the times and the seasons, brothers, you have no need to have anything written to you, for you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying, there's peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains come upon the pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you are not in darkness, brothers, for that day to surprise you like a thief. For you are all children of light, children of the day. We are not of the night or of the darkness. So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us keep awake and be sober. And for those who sleep, sleep at night. For those who get drunk are drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, having put the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet, the hope of salvation. For God has not destined us for wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, so that whether we are awake or asleep, we might live with him. Therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. Verse 18 of chapter 4 says, therefore encourage one another with these words. Therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. That's verse 11 of chapter 5. So it goes through some scary stuff. It's coming. We're marching towards an end. Jesus is going to come back, and it's going to happen with a flash. You can sit and try to do all the end time predicting. The bottom line is that it talks in the Bible how in the end times evil will be good and good will be evil. Look at all of the evil around us that is being celebrated. You are considered a hero if you have had an abortion. They want to exalt evil and make evil good. It's so sad. These children are being lifted up for all kind of crazy stuff. They're attacking our children. Pedophilia is being lifted up. We are definitely in the end times. But what does that mean? Is this end times for 100 years? Who knows? Tomorrow, it's like it says, the Lord will come like a thief in the night. You're not going to expect it. I sell security systems. As people, it's a safe area. Nothing's ever happened. Nothing ever happens until it happens. Jesus isn't going to come back until he comes back. And when he comes back, it's going to be quick. And that trumpet's going to sound. And not only are we responsible for ourselves, we're responsible for our brethren. We're responsible. We can't change their hearts, but we're the ones who are telling them. It says to encourage one another that Jesus is coming back. He's bringing all of heaven with him. This is the promise. Not that we're going to be, I'm not a rapture guy. I don't think we're going to be raptured away. I think that Jesus, the Bible points to Jesus coming back. Revelation talks about the New Jerusalem. So, I'm not trying to start a debate on any of that stuff, but I just know one thing, that what I just read you in First Thessalonians, that talks about the King coming back to finish what he started that day on Calvary. And when he comes back, it's going to be quick, and the old's going to burn away. And I mean, there's some very, very vivid imagery there of just fire, destruction, the old burning away as the new is born. So we have a responsibility to encourage our fellow humans, and we want to make more brothers and sisters. So every day, every moment, pay attention to those image bearers walking past you, because you could be the one who Jesus wants to use that day to have the darkness of their life meet the light of Jesus, and for that their lives to be changed forever. Think if nobody poured into you. Think if my parents hadn't brought me to church, and my youth pastors hadn't poured into me, and then whenever I went to Parkview and the Ring and my whole story, imagine if all of those people hadn't slowed down because they were grieving, because they had some loss, and they were so self-obsessed that they wouldn't take the time to pour into me, to let me know about the King, and that he's coming back, and that there's more to this life than just pain and hurt and death, that it is for a purpose, and that Jesus Christ of Nazareth, the Word, the Logos, the life-giving force of the universe, wants to use us to bring his hope to the world. So, the hurt, the help, the hope. I love y'all. I hope this message bless y'all. Feel free to share it with anybody who's a fellow believer, who's going through grief, or maybe someone who just might be open to hearing the story. Maybe an atheist. If you made it this far, thank you. I don't know how far this video will make it, but I know that this life is full of a lot of pain. So I want you to know that I'm praying for you. I'm going to pray right before we get off of this video, and I'm going to pray for you personally, even if I don't know you. Maybe the Spirit is speaking directly to you through this message. But yeah, he's in the grief. Jonah screamed out like, Lord, what do you know? He was so frustrated when he finally got to the point of being broken after he'd lost his family, everything he owned. And they called him a righteous man. So this was a man who was after God's heart. And he'd lost everything. And he cries out to God, and he's asking questions. And God's just like, where were you when I did this? Where were you when I spoke the universe into existence? What do you know about the behemoth? What do you know about the Leviathan? These powerful, some say dinosaur-like creatures that they were describing in Job. He's like, where were you? It's more complicated. Somehow suffering is a part of this life, and God is saying that it's more complicated than you understand. And suffering is just a part of this life, but it's a part of our walk with God, and it can be good if you move towards Him in it. So whatever your grief is, whatever you're going through right now that's overwhelming you, that's making it hard for you to breathe sometimes, or that's stressing you out, making you be ugly to people, making you have that, that hair trigger. Somebody comes up and says one little thing, and you're like screaming at them, and where'd that come from? That's some sort of grief you're not dealing with. That's some sort of stress that you're not saying, okay, God, this is bigger than me. I'm going to walk towards this instead of running from it. I want to deal with this. I want to open myself up and invite humans in too. Say, hey, look, I want to deal with this. Help hold me accountable. I love y'all. Let me pray. Jesus, help us with our grief. You are a holy, good God, and we love you, and we praise you, and we thank you. So, Lord, please help each person who's listening to this move to a place to where not only can we deal with our grief, Lord, that we thank you for it and say, Lord, this life is, a lot of it is about the suffering, but we know you're in the suffering, and we know the promise. We know that you're coming back. We love you, Jesus, and we praise you. Amen.